page 14. Better Never to Have Been, The Harm of Coming into Existence, by David Benatar, 2006. Chapter 1. 1.0. Introduction. Life is so terrible, it would have been better not to have been born. Who is so lucky? Not 1 in 100,000. Jewish saying. The central idea of this book is that coming into existence is always a serious harm. That idea will be defended at length, but the basic insight is quite simple. Although the good things in one's life make it go better than it otherwise would have gone, one could not have been deprived by their absence if one had not existed. Those who never exist cannot be deprived. However, by coming into existence one does suffer quite serious harms that could not have befallen one had one not come into existence. To say that the basic insight is quite simple is not to say that either it or what we can deduce from it will be undisputed. I shall consider all the anticipated objections in due course, and shall argue that they fail. The implication of all this is that coming into existence, far from ever constituting a net benefit, always constitutes a net harm. Most people, under the influence of powerful biological dispositions towards optimism, find this conclusion intolerable. They are still more indignant at the further implication that we should not create new people. Creating new people, by having babies, is so much a part of human life that it is rarely thought even to require a justification. Indeed, most people do not even think about whether they should or should not make a baby. They just make one. In other words, procreation is usually the consequence of sex rather than the result of a decision to bring people into existence. Those who do indeed decide to have a child might do so for any number of reasons, but among these reasons cannot be the interests of the potential child. One can never have a child for the child's sake. That much should be apparent to everybody, even those who reject the stronger view for which I argue in this book, that not only does one not benefit people by bringing them into existence, but one always harms them. My argument applies not only to humans but also to all other sentient beings. Such beings do not simply exist. They exist in a way that there is something that it feels like to exist. In other words, they are not merely objects but also subjects. Although sentience is a later evolutionary development and is a more complex state of being than insentience, it is far from clear that it is a better state of being. This is because sentient existence comes at a significant cost. In being able to experience, sentient beings are able to, and do, experience unpleasantness. Although I think that coming into existence harms all sentient beings and I shall sometimes speak about all such beings, my focus will be on humans. There are a few reasons for this focus, other than the sheer convenience of it. The first is that people find the conclusion hardest to accept when it applies to themselves. The focus on humans, rather than on all sentient life, reinforces its application to humans. A second reason is that, with one exception, the argument has most practical significance when applied to humans because we can act on it by desisting from producing children. The exception is the case of human breeding of animals, from which we could also desist. A third reason for focusing on humans is that those humans who do not desist from producing children cause suffering to those about whom they tend to care most to their own children. This may make the issues more vivid for them than they otherwise would be. I treat this as an exception because humans breed only a small proportion of all species of sentient animals. Although this is an exceptional case, it has great significance, given the amount of harm inflicted on those animals that humans breed for food and other commodities, and is thus worthy of brief discussion now. One particularly poor argument in defense of eating meat is that if humans did not eat animals, those animals would not have been brought into existence in the first place. humans would simply not have bred them in the numbers they do breed them. The claim is that although these animals are killed, this cost to them is outweighed by the benefit to them of having been brought into existence. This is an appalling argument for many reasons, some of which are outlined by Robert Nozick. See his Anarchy, State and Utopia, Oxford, Blackwell, 1974, 38a9. First, the lives of many of these animals are so bad that even if one rejected my argument, one would still have to think that they were harmed by being brought into existence. Secondly, those who advance this argument fail to see that it could apply as readily to human babies that are produced only to be eaten. Here we see quite clearly that being brought into existence only to be killed for food is no benefit. It is only because killing animals is thought to be acceptable that the argument is thought to have any force. In fact, it adds nothing to the mistaken view that killing animals for food is acceptable. Finally, the argument that animals are benefited by being brought into existence only to be killed ignores the argument that I shall develop in chapters 2 and 3a, that coming into existence is itself, quite independently of how much the animal then suffers, always a serious harm. Page 16.